Hi everyone, I'm Christy Brown with Daxco, and I'm so excited you've joined us for today's session on streamlining group fitness management at your YMCA and JCC. Before we jump in, just a few bits of housekeeping. All participants have been muted to cut down on background noise, but please feel free to ask questions via the chat or Q&A. We will have time dedicated at the end of this to actually pick the brain of Shannon as we talk with her today. So let's hop in. Your members love the energy and benefits of exercising together and typically have higher attention than those who work out solo. But managing all the moving parts of group exercise departments can be tedious. We are joined today by Shannon Fable, the GroupEX Pro Product Manager. Shannon co-founded GroupEX Pro in 2006 with her husband, John Fable, an experienced educator, freelance writer, and certified Book Yourself Solid business coach. She helps fitness entrepreneurs navigate the industry and make more money. Thank you for joining us, Shannon.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Christy.
So let's dig in. Shannon, can you kick us off by telling us about the pressures that group fitness managers are experiencing currently?
Of course. So, I started back in the 90s teaching, as I'm sure many of you did as well. They're on this call, and was quickly promoted to being a group fitness manager, mainly because I wanted a little bit more work. And that was how you got the job back then, right? You were the one that raised your hand and said, sure, I can take care of all the subbing. So I've been there with you. And I always like to start the conversation there because I'm not just some, outsider that's making assumptions about what you're going through on the daily. And of course, it depends on the type of club and the level of onboarding and support that you receive as a GFM with regards to, the issues that you experience. But universally, I'd say we are pulled in a million different directions. And I'm sure in the chat, you guys can give me an amen or a thumbs up or an eye roll. Not only are you the person that's responsible for instructors, whether that's hiring them, training them, evaluating them, making sure they show up for classes, but you also sit conveniently or inconveniently right in the middle of also dealing with members, both their gripes and their happiness, and next to your adjacent colleagues, whether that's a department manager for personal training or some childcare or the cafe or the front desk. And then you also have those that you answer to higher up, where you are responsible for pulling metrics and proving the worth of your department. Because let's face it, everyone knows that group fitness is really, really important. We're always called the heartbeat of the club. But at the end of the day, we spend more money than we theoretically, and I'm using air quotes, bring in. And we get that that's not really true, but like we're a dotted line to membership dues, right? And driving revenue, we're really held closely to retention. So we just sit in this interesting space in the middle being pulled. And I don't know about you, but in most of the jobs that I've held in the last 20 some odd years, the amount of money that I make is varied. The number of hours I have to do the job is varied. And then on top of that, I'm still teaching classes too, my own classes. So all of that kind of combines for the perfect storm where we have a, ton of energy and excitement about what we do, but we don't necessarily have a ton of support, and we have a lot on our plate. So lots to organize. You got the schedule, you got subbings, you got numbers, you got payroll, you got reports, you got special events, you hire, you fire, and everything in between. And, at the end of the day, I know for me, all I really wanted to do was teach other people how to teach, interact with members. And, I was drowning in the logistics. So I started the company because I wanted to allow myself to get back to the good stuff. Like I literally came home one day to my husband and said, if you cannot build me some kind of platform on the web that will get me out of email hell and out of constant phone treeing and crossing T's and dotting I's, like I'm going to lose my mind because I'm not doing the things that I love about group fitness and supporting my team in the way that I can. So yeah, all about getting back to the good stuff since we have a complicated and hard job.
I love that, like getting back to the good stuff. I know that's kind of been like the heartbeat of the pushing GroupEX Pro forward. What
Mm-hmm.
are some of the ways that GroupEX Pro really enables those wellness directors to do just exactly what you were saying?
Yeah, I'd say number one, it's the title of the webinar, right? It's about streamlining group fitness. So first, streamlining your communication, which is most important. The necessity is I am actually a communications minor from college. So I studied a lot about effective communication with groups, dyads, triads, and individuals. And the one thing that I always walked away with is it's extremely important to have one input and one output when you're managing teams. And I remember back in the 90s, and I don't know if any of you guys did teach in the 90s or managed groups in the 90s, like I said before, but it was so simple to communicate back then. Communication was inherently streamlined because people showed up to teach classes and you had hanging file folders on the stereo or on the stage, and you dropped a memo in their file folder. So I could easily get out whatever I needed. They would grab that memo, and I knew because the memo was no longer in their hanging file folder that they read it and had consumed it. And honestly, like things just weren't that complicated, right? You had one studio, 20 some odd instructors, a few different formats, but just the idea of this whole one input, one output made it really easy to know whether you were getting through and to find one another. And you fast forward to today, I can imagine you guys that are on this call right now, you probably have your email open, Facebook Messenger, your texts, and your phone calls. You've also got an office line, and people leave you memos and they leave you comment cards. Like it's coming at you from all angles. And then when you're trying to get back out to people, that just becomes exponential. So the first thing we want to do is create a way where you had a resource at your fingertips where as thoughts come into your mind, because they come into your mind every day, right? And trying to like save those up for the weekly memo has also become complicated. But we want you to be able to put those thoughts down in one input, and then allow instructors to engage with that input as it makes sense to them. Because the other issue that we're up against is most of us have part-time instructors, and they have varying degrees of engagement. And it's not for lack of trying, but you might have one that has 17.2 children, that's homeschooling them all and running soccer and Girl Scouts and everything in between. Got another that's a high-powered attorney that only teaches on the weekends, so they're not going to look at your emails during the week. So we needed to really massage this concept of one input, one output. That's first. The second is subbing, because I know that literally was my pain point when I came home to my husband and said, help me, because not only did I have a ton of different inputs and outputs going with regards to subbing, but it was also again, dotting the I's and crossing the T's to make sure that there wasn't a no-show, because that is like death to group fitness, right? When members show up expecting an instructor, and it's usually either an emergency, which we can't do anything about, but if ever there's a no-show beyond an emergency, it's usually because there is just some crisscrossing communication where either someone didn't double confirm or get back to someone else, and there was an assumption that it was all taken care of. So needed to figure out a way to make that workflow a little bit more transparent and visible. And then finally, it's the schedule. So this is where the product evolved from just being a subbing and communication platform. I found myself really having a hard time connecting the in-club assets. So whether that was, a poster on the wall or a schedule outside of a group fitness studio, with the one that was printed at the front desk that they took away, with the one that maybe they were seeing online, like trying to keep all of those schedules synced up with the just nimble nature, the organic nature, how often the group fitness schedule changes. And not that we change classes all the time, but you might change the person that's teaching it, or it might have to be canceled last minute because of an emergency, or like I'm sitting here in Boulder where it was 75 degrees yesterday and today there's a blizzard. So, we might be hitting cancel on all those afternoon classes, and just trying to like not only communicate with my staff from a streamlining perspective, but also communicate with members with those changes so they trust the product and know where to go. That was becoming a challenge. So those are the three main areas, definitely the communication with the team, subbing, and then the schedule.
Perfect. I'd love to dig into managing schedules, because you've given a good picture, but I'd really love to talk through what an example of how this is run by a team that doesn't have some sort of group fitness management system and what that workflow would look like.
Sure. I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I'll try to do my best. I know in the clubs where I was before, or if they would not adopt something like a GroupEX Pro, the challenge was there was a paper schedule that members could take home. And then there was an online schedule, but that online schedule was managed by a third party. So whether that was an internal IT department or web department, but again, like I was talking about, syncing up those two schedules was really, really challenging. And then ensuring that a member had the right schedule, because anyone that knows me knows I rule my life and interactions by the bumper sticker. Conflict is when expectations don't meet reality. And a lot of times the members that I had to deal with that were frustrated was because they had, like, and you guys I wish you were off mute so you could all chuckle at the same time. It's because they had a schedule from like 1972 that was still stuck on their fridge, right? And they were wondering why they showed up at 9 a.m. on Monday to take XYZ class and it wasn't there. Well, because we have a new schedule. But then again, I get it. Like if you haven't come to the club in 3 months, you might not have picked up the latest one. And again, like I was talking about, you might have a sub. And as much as we don't want them to care about who's teaching the class, they do. That's not going away anytime soon. So, you had the paper one that needed to be updated. We'd have to send it off to the printers. It'd have to live for a quarter at a time. So there was no way to populate it with subs. Once it was printed, it was printed. If there were special circumstances, best of luck getting that information out to members. And like I was mentioning, that just, kind of created this panic for me where like I really wanted members to make sure they knew what was going on. So again, they could trust the product and they could make, and it's becoming even more important now, right? Like they need and want, they desire to make smart decisions on the daily. They don't like lock themselves into schedules like they used to. Now, I know some of them do, right? Like our older members probably still have their dedicated Monday, Wednesday, Friday routine or whatever, but it's just so fluid now. And then the other thing, the online schedule that we were discussing, hopefully you have one, because even if you are YMCA and you feel like some of your population won't look at it, or JCC where you don't think that they're all online, we are starting to cater to other people that is their primary, right? Like they don't even want to have a piece of paper cluttering anything. They're doing everything online. And the problem with the online, like you might be putting up a PDF again that you've got to manage and then re-upload whenever, or if you're lucky, you've got something like I was mentioning where like an IT department has created some kind of database where you plug in the info, you tell them it's ready, they push it to production, then you have to go back and check. Usually it takes 24 to 36 hours or sometimes longer for it to get pushed out. And you've got to remember to go back and check and make sure that it's right? So that all can lead to complications as well. And I go back to, my existence is to make the group fitness manager's life easy, because I know with all that we talked about earlier, with what you have to do, the last thing you want is panic or anxiety around whether or not your schedule is right. And I could go on and on, because then there's the subbing schedule, which is a whole nother schedule you've got to keep track of, right? You've got like, I know I used to have it on my digital calendar, or I used to have one of those big giant like pasted schedules sitting on my desk where I would in pencil write out everything, all the classes that were open that needed subs and who had said they could do it and who got chosen, and did they double confirm back that they were doing it, and then did I reach out to the instructor and make sure that they knew that it was happening. So it's just all of that combined. Those are all the schedules you're dealing with. And then finally, hopefully, crossing my fingers, I know you can't see me, but I hope you're doing some kind of reporting for your upper management to continue to show your worth. And, if you're doing any kind of sophisticated reporting around cost per head or penetration, you actually need the real-time schedule. So not just the schedule that you assumed would happen today, Monday, February 3rd, but tomorrow morning when I look back at Monday, what actually did occur? Did that class happen? Was it canceled? Who taught it? How much money did that cost me? Because I can't really give you good metrics if I don't know how much the class cost me. And I can't know how much the class cost me unless I'm keeping close track of who actually was there to teach it. Was it the real instructor that usually owns it, or was it a sub that charged something else? So I don't know if that answers your questions, but if your head is spinning, it makes my head spin thinking about how I used to manage all of that before I had a system like this that synced all of it up for me, made it really, really simple.
Sure. I will say, as someone who attends group fitness, it is something that you take for granted, all of the moving parts of managing that. I'm sure that everything you talked through resonates with our listeners. How would you say that GroupEX Pro really actually solves this for customers?
Sure, it's actually an easier statement to make than telling you about all the problems. So in GroupEX Pro, once you enter the schedule, that is your source of truth. And everything is fueled from there. So you request subs directly from the anticipated schedule in GroupEX Pro. And then when the subs are approved, the schedule automatically updates. That schedule also fuels what your member sees on your website and possibly your club app, depending on what app you use. And it all gets updated right then and there. And that also means that your reports are pulled from the source of truth. So I hope that's all making sense, but long short, I build my schedule. Any subbing that happens from there, and it updates automatically because that schedule updates automatically. What the members see updates automatically. And because that's also the source of truth where I'm capturing my data to do reporting, it's going to have the right person teaching the class. It knows how much that person is making. It knows if I canceled a class to zero it out. So because it's all coming from one place, the minute that I make a change to that, everywhere else that I need to keep track of that schedule is updated simultaneously.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the communication piece, because I think that ties into what you're talking about as well. How does GroupEX Pro really streamline that communication and sub requests for the group fitness team?
Yeah. So my biggest desire was to get out of my email inbox, because what I found is that it was really hard to follow the logic of a subbing workflow via email. And again, I go back to talking about how you have varying levels of engagement from your instructors. And again, that is no criticism on an instructor. They all live different lives, right? With regards to how closely tied they are to their phone throughout the day, when they have the chance to check their email and see what's going on. And that can cause some issues with the subbing workflow. So we get you out of your email inbox or messenger or text. And while you're probably still going to use that, right, to some degree, everything that's universal can go through this central portal that is GroupEX Pro. There's a notices section that replaces your newsletter, memo, weekly email that you probably feel you need to create each week. And the cool thing is that only managers can put up those notices. And why that's important, instructors can still comment there. They can even click a button to let you know that they read what you wrote, which is great, but they can't hijack the business. And I'm not saying hijack as a bad thing, but you know what I mean. So you send out an email with your weekly memo of the 5 super important things that are happening that week, probably happened today because it's the beginning of a new month. And what that ends up doing usually is it triggers an instructor that they either need a question answered or they need a sub or they have something they need to say. And so quickly, your very important email becomes a reply all. So now it's February updates, and it has nothing to do with your updates. Now it's some other tangential conversation. And it just keeps cascading where when I go back to this whole concept of like varying levels of engagement from instructors, that high-powered lawyer that's a great instructor on Saturday morning is getting extremely annoyed because it's one thing they're managing in a very full week. So when you can have it streamlined in that notices section where you put out your little snippet, it also doesn't have to be 5 thoughts in one notice. It can be 1 thought in a notice. They can comment and you can clarify. But it doesn't get hijacked, if that makes sense. Now, there are other places where we have that we want to foster creating community and giving people a place to have conversations with their teammates. So there's a forum and there's a class plan section, and they can start notices there. I shouldn't call them notices. They can start messages there, but at least we separate the business from the pleasure or the business from the community building. When it comes to subbing specifically, what's really great is subbing is completely pulled out of these more business-oriented reminders or action items that you need to give instructors. So an instructor needs a sub for Friday. They go to their class on the schedule on Friday inside GXP. They hit create sub request. Sub request is automatically populated with all the details. What studio is it in? What type of a class is it? When does it start? When does it stop? Who's the normal instructor? The instructor that's putting the sub request up can even put additional comments like, for example, like, hey, if you can take it this week, I can help you out next week because I'm in town and I'm off work, or this is what my class really loves, this is what my class really hates, I'll even give you a class plan, whatever you want. You can communicate as much as you want about that sub request, but it goes into its own little holding cell. It goes into the sub board, and that subboard is organized in most urgent need. So meaning the class that needs subbing that is coming up soonest on the calendar is at the top of the feed. And your instructors see that, they get notified about that. You can even push out an urgent notification to the instructor app. There's an instructor app as well. And people can click, they can sub it, and you can have a clear view of that queue and make the smartest choice about who to sub. And like I said earlier, with regards to the schedule, the minute that you approve a sub, everyone gets an email letting them know what's happening. So instructor that needed the sub for Friday gets an email saying your class has been covered. If I'm the one subbing it, I get an email saying, yay, thanks for saying you could sub it. You've been chosen. If anyone else was in that queue and they are no longer needed, they're released by getting an email saying, hey, the class has been covered. You're not needed. Thanks so much for raising your hand. The schedule gets changed. It comes off the subboard, and everyone that sees that schedule and your back-end reporting is also changed. So it's a super simple workflow that keeps those three things separate, right? So your business, your action items for your team, a place where they can create community and ask questions and share ideas, and then this whole sub thing, which gosh, it just needs to be its own thing, right? Because it's so important and so meticulous. So it has its own place in GroupEX Pro.
Wow, that really just like streamlines something that is much more, has a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah, it makes it far less complicated. You'd be surprised.
Yes. You mentioned measuring success of your classes, and I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the reports that are available, because I think that that is important. I liked how you said that you need to be able to report to your leadership on updates, but also just around general success of the class. Can you dig into some of those?
I can. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I was an office manager before I flipped full time into, well, I always say, I was teaching classes and I was managing classes, and I had this office manager job on the side. It was 40 hours a week, but it paid the bills. And I got to go to Excel classes, which made me really excited because, every girl loves a good spreadsheet. So I had one leg up in the world of reporting where I understood how to manipulate data inside of a spreadsheet and showcase it in a way that could prove my worth. I was very fortunate to get that schooling in my job. But what I found as I started counseling group fitness managers is honestly probably the only time they had for reporting was raw numbers. So the ever present, sign-in sheet, and everyone has a slightly different version of it, but there's a sign-in sheet right on the stereo. You record your raw numbers. We're trusting that everyone is telling the truth. Or you might go an extra step and have the front desk come in and do it in the middle of class. I know we did that at Crunch way back in the day so that the numbers were a little more valid. But at the end of the day, we know that numbers don't tell the whole story. They only get the story started. And that's a whole nother conversation. If your upper management is still making you make choices based on raw numbers, and you have you have to have this many people or you can't keep doing that class, that's something I'd love to chat with you about because there's more. But I get why you might not have more to give, because you've got to know how to manipulate data, set up spreadsheets, keep that spreadsheet up to date when classes change. So we do have a numbers report, but it's a little more sophisticated than just pulling raw numbers. Instructors can enter their numbers privately, which straight away increases the validity of the number, because they're not comparing their numbers to someone else. It's happening in a silo. Now, granted, people may still fudge, but they're a little less inclined to fudge in a really big way because they're not seeing how their class numbers compare to others. Whole nother conversation. But they can enter that number straight on their instructor app. That information goes into GroupEX Pro, and you as the manager can see that info. And when you go to create a report, let's say monthly or in conjunction with payroll, you select your date range and hit query, and it shows you quickly how much that class cost you and what was the cost per head. So not only what was the raw cost of that class or the raw cost of all of those classes within a payroll period, but it also shows you, okay, my instructor makes $20 an hour. She had 20 people in the class, so that was $1 per head. And I can start looking, because that's a better way to compare apples to apples. Now, it's still not the best. I'm going to give you some other metrics, but it just gives you a deeper level of sophistication around gathering those numbers as it pertains to how much you're paying that instructor to service that number of members. So really cool. And the instructor, like I said, can enter it. It's really easy for you to see who hasn't entered their numbers on a daily basis and reach out, rather than waiting until the next time you're in the club to pull that piece of paper and then go back and ask. So that's kind of cool. The next report is the penetration report. So if you want to showcase even or have a better way to showcase your worth as a department, you want to be looking at penetration. And that is when you compare the number of people that you serviced in group fitness products, so in your classes, compared to the number of people that are using the club in that time frame. So you can put in the number of swipes from the front desk. It already knows the raw numbers, how many people you serviced that day, and it'll show you what percentage of the people that came through the turnstiles at the front desk were there to visit a group fitness class. And that is a metric that a lot of clubs are starting to really pay attention to in their efforts to get people moving, right? When they see that, gosh, group fitness, you're servicing 25% of our members, where personal training, which is our bread and butter because of the ancillary revenue, and I'm, not scoffing at the ancillary revenue that personal training brings in, but when it comes to retention and the number of people we're getting off of equipment and all that good stuff, like when you can show the trend that your percentage number is going up, it's great. So penetration's huge, pain in the butt to do without the software. And then you also have a payroll report. We call it the payroll report. It's not like it automatically talks to your payroll processor, but it helps you aggregate across a date range how many classes, Christy, for example, that you taught during the last 2 weeks, so that I can compare that with you. It becomes your time sheet is the best way to put it. Makes it really easy to, triple check your payroll at the end of a payroll period. And then finally, if you really, really want to dig into numbers and this gets you excited, we have a performance analysis tool or program analysis tool. And basically it's a pivot table on caffeine. So you can basically extrapolate information in any way that you want and see how things are performing across a day, a category, a class type, an instructor, time range. For most clubs, it's like way over the top, but we do have a lot of clubs that are, their upper management is asking for more, or you've got sophisticated group fitness managers that are going, gosh, if I could put together a compelling report every month to show my executive director or my ops manager, whomever, just how well we're doing, imagine what we could get. So yeah, we're pretty excited about the reporting features and giving you a super easy way to do it that is pretty good. It also helps you make really smart decisions when you sit down with your instructors and have performance reviews, because if you don't have something like this, we track a 12-month look back on instructors across a few categories. One, how many times have they subbed out their classes? Two, how many times have they offered to sub? Three, how many times have they actually subbed? Are they creating comments on posts and reading your posts? So it gives you some objective data to sit down during a performance review where you're not just spitballing and saying, yes, you are a team player, no, you're not a team player, et cetera. So yeah, lots of stuff you can do on the back end with reporting.
So you've mentioned before that GroupEX Pro really works as an extension of your HR department, and I think what you were just talking about is a great example of that, like setting you up for the having those performance reviews discussion, making sure you're evolving. Are there some other ways that kind of acts as an extension?
Yeah, so you have to put in your users. Your instructors are your users. And when you go to input users, we give you the ability to create as many additional user fields as you'd like. An example of a user field might be a birth date. Like, you automatically have to input their name, their phone number. Well, they can input it actually, and their pay rate. But you can also track things with these additional user fields, such as birth date, or the one that we need to track on every instructor usually is CPR, certifications, and what formats they can teach. So if you have something like a certification user field, you can input that date and it can trigger messages to you, to the instructor, or to both once or twice at different stages prior to that date arriving. So some of you may already have this type of HR software that you have to use, but a lot of clubs, they don't. We're managing that on spreadsheets and having to turn that in quarterly to HR, but you can easily extract that data, shoot it off to your HR department. And like I said, it can notify you when dates are coming up, like annual review dates or birth dates as well. And then you can honestly track just about anything you want. The nice thing about it, they can also update their phone number. So last thing I'll mention is, I remember the bane of my existence was the phone list, or what eventually became the email list for instructors. It was so hard to keep that thing up to date with how quickly people changed cell phone numbers. Did they still teach for us? Were they no longer on the sub list? Did they change their email address? Do you have to email them here in the morning and here at night? And I was constantly updating that and then trying to ensure I could get that out to my instructors so they were emailing the right people or communicating with the right people. Because how many of us, I know I'm still on a sub list somewhere here in Boulder at a club that I have not taught at in 7 years. And from time to time, some poor unfortunate soul shoots me a message on my cell phone at 5 o'clock in the morning in a panic, seeing if I can teach. And I feel really bad, but obviously she just doesn't have the right contact list, or maybe I'm still on the list. I don't think I am, but you get the idea. We put all that in your hands, but also in their hands. So an instructor can update their contact information very, very quickly. And then it kind of becomes, on them to keep that up to date, to ensure that they are receiving the information they need, but they can always get back into GroupEX Pro proactively. So yeah, all of that is just another example of how, it really does help minimize the, the things that you're having to keep track of and keep up to date and keep pushing out to people to keep your program humming along.
Perfect. Shannon, thank you so much for talking about just general ways to streamline that group fitness management. I'm going to go ahead and have people submit some Q&A, and
Sure.
we can pick her brain. While people are submitting their questions, I have one last question for you. I would love for the people on the call to be able to really hear from their peers or connect with others that are using GroupEX Pro. So do you have any examples of YMCAs or JCCs that have seen success with the solution?
Yeah, I always like to point to two. I mean, there are plenty of them, and I'm happy to send out a list. We can always give you a list of folks to contact. But the YMCA of the Twin Cities was actually client number one, besides clubs that I was working with. And I always like to tell that story because, this wasn't me and my husband in some dark room making assumptions about what people would want. The YMCA of the Twin Cities, Sean Levesque in particular, was my partner in crime going, no, we don't need that feature. Yes, we need that feature. And here's what I am struggling with across 27 branches that I think now is like 30 or 32. So, I always say if a YMCA like that with that much geography to cover, that many instructors, that many managers, that many branches can make use of the system, it's pretty robust and easy to use, right? Because we know there's a lot of turnover in group fitness management, but it's been really easy. They've been a customer now for, I want to say 13 years, 12 years. And then the JCC of San Francisco is another really big, well done program out in California, the Bay Area. And they have been a customer for well over 10 years. I think they were very close behind the YMCA of the Twin Cities. And they had unique needs compared to the YMCA with the way they're set up and the way that they're run. They were also instrumental in helping us just pressure test some of these different features. So those would be the two that I always point to. But of course, you've got the YMCA of Dallas and Houston and in the Charlotte area. We just onboarded the First Coast YMCAs in Jacksonville. We have plenty of YMCAs and JCCs across the country that are using our system.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to pick your brain with a couple of questions that were submitted. The first is, everything that we've discussed is really great, but what are some areas for a demo if they wanted to kind of see the system in action?
Oh, for sure. We have client executives that are happy to take you through a deep dive, but we do have a 16-minute version on the website. So if you just go to groupexpro.com and you can click on tour, and I'll show you a quick overview. Now, I mean, obviously we can't update that demo every time a feature changes. So some of the newest features we've released in the last year since the acquisition, they may not be fully present, but you can get an idea of the workflow and what it looks like and how easy it is to use. That'd be the best. And then of course you can always raise your hand and let us know, and we'll hook you up with someone that can take you through a deep demo and answer your questions about how it works specifically for you and your team.
Perfect. I have another question about the integration with Daxco Mobile. Is there some sort of interface?
There is. So we just completed, I shouldn't say just, gosh, I think it's been like 3 or 4 months now, completed phase 1 of our integration. So it's our first pass at integrating the two. But now if you turn on the integration, GroupEX Pro becomes your source of truth for the schedule. And that schedule is now displayed in the Daxco Mobile application. So that is what the Daxco Mobile integration looks like right now.
Perfect. And then one final question is if they're implementing on a system other than Daxco, is it something that they can still leverage?
Meaning if you don't use Daxco Operations or Daxco Mobile?
Correct.
Oh, gosh, for sure. I mean, the thing is GroupEX Pro was set up to be a standalone product to manage your team. Where it starts to intersect with things potentially like DAXCO operations, DAXCO mobile is the showcasing of that schedule. But we give you the ability in the back end, there's an embed code, so you can show your schedule on your website right away. Very, very simple. And so yeah, it can totally be a standalone. And we're exploring other third-party integrations as well. We do integrate with the NetPulse app if that's what you have, and Reach Media, which I know many of you have that as digital signage. But know that GroupEX Pro is a standalone product that allows you to do everything that I just talked about independent of your operating system that runs your front desk or your CRM that works with your sales team. And the schedule that is fueled by GroupEX Pro to show to your members is a very simple embed code that you can put on your website.
Perfect. So yes, anyone can access it.
Yes, for sure.
And then actually I have one more question that came in. It is about if it's included in DAXCO or is it a separate fee?
It is a separate fee.
Perfect.
And, or if you do DAXCO mobile, they combine those two things. So it can go either way. It depends on how, all those, which of those systems you have together, but it is priced separately.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Shannon, so much for talking with us today. And thank you everyone who joined the webinar today as well. I was having a couple of technical difficulties, so thank you for being patient with us and Shannon running with it. Please be on the lookout for the recording of this webinar to share with your team. I'm sure that they will want to poke around as well. If you want to learn more about ways our team can help you really streamline that group fitness, reach out to marketing@daxco.com and we can get you connected. And Shannon, thank you so much for your time.
Of course, thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.
You too.